Okay, let's now turn to student debt because new research shows just how predatory the student debt industry, the student lending industry really is.
Right. This is really awful. This is a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning. They did a pretty big report about just how bad the student loan crisis is in the United States. I mean, we've been talking about for quite a while here on the show how bad it is for students just across the board to be saddled with this kind of student loan debt. But now, according to this Wall Street Journal piece, we're learning that these lenders are specifically targeting low income and low middle class individuals for these loans. And they know they're never going to be able to pay them back.
That's right. Some of these terrible statistics from these Parent Plus loans, which are very high interest loans that go after people specifically with lower income. That is it just at Baylor alone, or
No.
this is all over?
They really focused on
no,
Baylor.
that can't be. Yes, $103.6 billion in outstanding loans.
That's amazing.
The high interest outstanding loans of Baylor alone, right? Baylor in the last couple of years has tried to position itself as like an Ivy League school in Texas. And by doing that, they raised their prices. They tried to get more income per student. 47% had children receiving federal loans for low income students. And when they were asked, do you take the family's finances into account when you admit these students? And they said, no, we don't actually. And so, okay, is it fair, right? So if I'm a low income family and I have this dream that my child will go to a prestigious university.
But that's what they're preying on.
Absolutely. But is it the school's responsibility to say, you're low income, you will never pay this off based on your finances, we can't admit your child, right? When the idea of it as a parent where you're like, please just let me, like, I'll live with this debt until I die, I have this dream for my kid. Is it the responsibility of the university? I don't know. Is it the responsibility of the debt servicer? Absolutely it is. You cannot qualify for debt you can't afford when it comes to a house or a car. Why should someone qualify for a debt product?
Well, it's a great question. No, I mean,
afford?
that's a great question because you have to be able to prove that you can pay it back.
Yes.
In the same way of, you're getting a house, right? You have to be able to prove that you can pay off the loan.
Right.
That you're going to pay this back. So, I think it comes down to the lenders. I mean, quite honestly, why does it come down to the university?
Right. And why is there federal regulation that's so strict to make sure that we don't have another housing crisis? That means that home lenders they could never offer a debt product like this. Basically, you will never pay it off, but that's okay.
But this is because these big banks run Washington. These big banks and these corporations, they run Washington. So, of course, there's not going to be any regulation of this predatory
But then why
lending.
is there regulation of home and auto loans? If these big banks are running Washington.
There is and there isn't now. There's a lot of concern about the auto industry because all of these zero interest loans, there was a lot of fear before in 2008 that the next shoe to drop was going to be all of these repos for these car loans because everyone could get them for like 0% down.
Yeah.
And it was even worse than the housing market in terms of who could qualify in 2008. And if you'll notice, of course, after 2008, 2009, we had the Dodd-Frank Act. We had a number of things that tried to stop these lenders from taking advantage of people and from people getting loans they didn't have a job. How are you going to get a house payment if you don't have a job, right? So there was a lot of things put in place. But guess what? Under Trump and under Obama, and now even under Biden, a lot of these regulations have almost been totally erased. On the mortgage side.
Right. We were reporting on Monday even that now, no, that was yesterday, the story we did about friend real estate purchases.
Oh, yeah. So teaming up with your friend to get
that now you can
home.
put between only 5 and 10% down in order to get a loan. Right. These are some of the sort of irresponsible things that imploded an entire economy. So it's crazy. And, there's no regulation on how much they can charge you for a loan product. If you really are learning to evaluate debt as just a bank product, right? I want a car, I want a house, I want whatever it is. I want a personal line of credit. You just evaluate what you're going to pay for money. That's it, right? These are the worst products on the market. The worst. And a lot of times when you go to apply for something like this, they decide what the interest rate will be based on your family's income, which is crazy, right? Like, we're going to decide what we can charge you, and then you
It's
decide.
like, to me, it's kind of like payday loans or that kind of stuff. It keeps people in a perpetual
Right.
cycle of poverty. And so, as this highlights here, I've highlighted it here on the screen. Trinia Savarin, who's a 53-year-old public school administrator in Texas, she owes $231,000 in federal student loans, of which at least $65,000 in Parent Plus loans came from sending her daughter to Baylor. At least $74,000 in plus loans for her son's college costs and loans for her own 2015 master's degree.
Oh, it's just
She says,
tragic.
I'll never get it all paid off.
Because this is somebody who dared to dream that these degrees would put their family in a position to pay them off. And it clearly didn't, right?
No,
None of them are making this to pay it off in a single year.
And good for the Wall Street Journal. They've been covering these stories. This was a few months ago. We covered it here on the show, the story about the financially hobbled for life, these master's degrees that people get, that they'll never, like when you go to Columbia or some of these other elite universities, you'll never be able to pay them off. Recent film graduates of Columbia University who took out federal student loans have a median debt of $181,000.
Yeah.
How are you ever going to pay that off? Yet 2 years after earning their master's degree, half of the borrowers were making less than $30,000 a year.
But it's hard to say to someone, hey, your dream is to go get a master's degree for this, but that's never going to pay off, so don't do it, right?
Is it though, or is it tough love? Because we've talked about, one of the reasons we moved out of that area, out of that situation, is it so that our kids could have access to a great education and not be saddled with intense student loan
But
debt.
when you live in America and these are your options, right? It's hard to say to someone, hey, go to a more economical college. There are other ways. Like, we just don't think like that. We get into this mental trap of, I need this prestigious degree to get me into this job. It's just so hard to say to someone, that degree will not pay off. Don't do it.
Yeah, is there? I'm sure you've studied this in your time getting your master's degree. But is there a correlation between someone who goes to Baylor getting a better job, higher paying job than a person just going to a community college?
In academics, there definitely is.
Well, in academics, which is a whole world unto itself, but getting like an accounting degree, getting an accounting degree from a community college or a university that's not Baylor, or getting an accounting degree from Baylor, like, are you going to be able to still become an accountant if you didn't go to Baylor?
I don't know enough about like hiring practices of accountants, but they're
I'm just using that as an example.
right.
Anyway, Richard Wolff, who's I love this guy. He's an amazing economist, and he just did a special report on this last night on why the United States and the UK are the two worst places in the world to get a higher education. Listen to Richard Wolff on this issue.
And so in the United States, students who still decide to go have to rack up debt. And I wanted to give you an idea, in case you're wondering. Yeah, debt per student is higher in the United Kingdom and the United States than anywhere else. They're not even close. And here's the number to keep in your mind for the United States. In 2016, there were 171 million adults in the United States. That's people who aren't kids anymore, but are 60 years of age or younger. That's what we mean by the adult population, right? 44 million had student debt out of the 171. That's
God.
1 in 4 adults has student debt. And here's the averages in 2016. We're 5 years later now. All these numbers would have to be adjusted. In 2016, the average debt, $37,000. And it was costing the average graduate $400 a month to service the debt. The smartest people in many ways, the ones with the best chance to get an education, borrow money, go to school, and are left with tens of thousands of dollars, paying $400 a month in order simply to service the debt.
It just doesn't have to be that way. The rest of the world is not like this.
Right. He started that piece off by talking about, he said, let me give you 8 European countries where it costs $0 to get a college degree. Zero. Zero, or he said, or as close to zero, maybe just a few $100s per semester. And he ran down the list from Hungary to the Netherlands to Denmark to, to Finland to Sweden to Norway, like the whole list, where these kids are not saddled with student loan debt.
Comparable good education. I mean, there is no such thing as a doctor with a large debt in Europe.
Right. Or a lawyer. Or anything
or
like that.
anything like that. So absolutely, it doesn't have to be like this.
Really troubling.
I just recently saw a comparison where it was looking at how many weeks of full-time work at minimum wage it took in the early 70s to pay for your college tuition, and it was like 14 weeks. So you could do it in a summer vacation. Currently, it would take 56 weeks, which means you couldn't pay off a year's tuition because there aren't enough weeks to work. That was if you were working full-time. You still couldn't pay off a year's worth of tuition.
That is awful.
Wow. And that doesn't account for the fact that the average worker works from January to May for the government. The government takes basically in tax money all of the money you make from January to May. And then whatever you make from June to December is what you keep, what you take home. So if you include that, pre-tax or post-tax payment, then you're right. You absolutely can't. You have to live longer.
Cindy Girl has some good comments in the chat here. She says, but whenever it's suggested that our government help out in student loan debt in our country, the forbidden socialism word gets brought up. Yeah, is Norway a socialist country? No, it's not. It's a market economy. It's not socialist. Is Finland socialist? No, it's not. Is Hungary? No, it's not. Yet they take care of their people, and they have health care, and they have education. And, these lenders in the United States, these banks in the United States, run the show.
Yeah.
They absolutely run the show. So really, really troubling. Hopefully we'll have some, maybe President Biden with the executive pen could do a reversal of the student loan debt, but there's been no movement on that. And Elizabeth Warren has been calling for it. She's been asking the president to eliminate all student loan debt, and the president has been reluctant to do so.
Okay, so what can we do though? Like at this moment in time, you have a dream, your child is going to Baylor or Harvard or what have you. It's your responsibility to evaluate the debt product. Just see your student loan as a debt product. Should you take this on or shouldn't you? Most of them are pretty terrible.
Right.
That no family should take on this debt product. Are there comparable schools that cost less? Is there a way to get this education for something that will not put you into this financial situation, right? This is, again, something we talk about in the Financial Freedom Academy is just learn to evaluate the playing field for your own self, because otherwise you're buying into this belief, right? Like owning a home, expensive college, expensive car is what completes my American experience, right? But it also is what keeps you a slave to it. Can you do it yourself, right?
And I think one of the key things is to consider the ROI, so the return on investment of this degree. I've been hitting this for the last 2 years on this show, which is, do you understand the return on the investment of becoming an art student, right? And I use that as an example, and nothing against art, but is it worth you going into $70,000 in student loan debt to learn how to become an artist? Okay, then you have to map it out and figure out, well, okay, when I get out of college, how will then I be able to pay this back? What is the return on this investment? How many years will it take me to pay that back? And so if you become a teacher, you become a lawyer, you become a doctor, you know that 13 years of school to become a doctor or whatever it is, it's going to take you 7 years of working at a hospital making $350,000 a year in order for you to pay back the $400,000 loan. You need to reverse engineer these numbers. You can't just blindly go into it, right?
With it, just because your dream is the driving force and I'm going to do whatever it takes.
Right. I want to be an architect. Okay, that's 5 years of schooling. Well, how much can you make as an architect working for yourself or another firm? Well, I can make probably this much per year. Great. It'll take you 7 years then to pay off this in the United States of America. You need to figure these numbers out, I think. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.